everybody there? Yeah, so you're going to have like these 4 colors. If you have a phone, hold it up for me. We're going to play an interactive game with all of you right now if you have a phone. If you don't have your phone out, awesome, cool. All right, answerbycolor.com. So show me. All right, so what we want to know, we're talking about social media today. And so the biggest thing maybe it's just me, I kind of want to know is what social media you have, because that may kind of direct in the way. If you have Instagram, I want you to choose red. Don't choose yet, because I'm going to give you multiple options. If you have TikTok, choose green. If you have Facebook, you're really old, choose blue. If you have all of them, choose yellow. If you only have 2 of them, choose yellow as well. That means you have multiple. Green, if you don't have social media, that's awesome. Kind of. Okay, so green was TikTok, red was Instagram, yellow was multiple platforms, and Facebook was all our leaders. Because we're all old, because we all have Facebook. Okay. All right, so we have mostly on TikTok, of course, because that's the generation. Okay, so first, we just want to start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about, your family and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Justin, as he said earlier. I'm 32. I'm just trying to figure out how to sit, first of all. Sorry. I'm like, do I sit like this? Do I post up like this?
Yeah, that's
I think this is the one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm Justin. I just turned 32 on Saturday. It makes me feel really old. Your mom is older than me? I hope she is. Have any of you guys ever watched Twitch before? Yeah, so I stream full time on Twitch.
What's a Twitch?
It's like where people play video games and people watch people play video games and stuff. So I started off. I competed in Halo for a number of years. I went to my first tournament when I was 15. I did not win that one. No, I didn't come close. It was kind of funny. I was 15. I asked my parents. I was kind of joking with them. I was like, "Hey guys, there's a Halo tournament in North Carolina. I should go, right? That'd be super fun." I was being all sarcastic and stuff because I knew they were going to be like, "No," and they were like, "Well, actually, we have a friend over there. Sure, why not?" So I just flew across the country at 15 years old by myself and went to my first tournament. And then the next tournament after that, I placed pro, and from then on, I just competed for a long time. Had lots of sponsors. I would travel all over the U.S. going to different tournaments. And then when I got older, I was like, "Hey, I competing is really fun, but I'm married. Now I have kids." And I was like, I need to do something a little bit more stable. So I started streaming full time. I just literally my first son was right about to be born. He was gonna be born maybe in a month or something like that. And I was like, I'm gonna just try streaming and see what happens. And it just kind of took off. And now I've been streaming full time for 4 years.
What's your YouTube channel called? Yeah.
I don't really use my YouTube channel.
Aw, because I'm gonna subscribe. What's it called?
That's so nice.
Nice.
I'm not here to advertise my channel. We'll talk after. You guys want to, yeah. But yeah, so I just started streaming full time on Twitch, and now here we are 4 years later. I'm still doing it. I'm signed to a gaming org that helps me a lot. They fly me all over the place, and it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So last week we discussed how our relationships with unbelievers change when we become a Christian. Okay, so in that context, how does your relationship with culture change as well when you become a Christian?
When you become a Christian and you start to follow Jesus, it kind of gives you a new lens. If you guys can imagine new glasses that you start to look through the world with. And a lot of the times for me, in my walk, becoming a Christian kind of exposed to me just the things that aren't very Christ-like in the world. But at the same time, it's led me to care so much about people, Christian or non-Christian alike. It's man, I know this love that is so deep, from our Heavenly Father. And like I hope I can share that with other people, right? And a lot of times being a Christian can be pretty scary, right? It can be pretty scary to talk about Jesus, especially nowadays. I feel like it was cool and in to be a Christian maybe 20 years ago, but nowadays it's not really the cool club to be in anymore. And I think that even more than ever, the world needs us to love like Jesus loves right now.
Is culture bad?
It's hard to say like if something is like just good or just bad. I think there are aspects of culture that can be negative. I think there are aspects of culture that can be positive. I actually have a verse I was going to pull up. This one is from John chapter 17. It's verse 14. And this is Jesus talking. I want to read off that so you guys can see. It says, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world. Just as I am not of the world, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. And I thought that was always such a cool verse because Jesus prayed, and he's talking about us, he's talking about Christians, he's talking about his kids. And it's very specific that, like, the world, you can replace that with culture, like what you're talking about, whether it be social media or whatever culture. And I always find it so interesting that Jesus, like, he wants us to be in the world to be able to love and affect change and to bring more people to his love and to the family. But at the same time, since we're not of the world, it's like that cheesy brand. You remember that brand, Not of This World?
Oh yeah, like.
Does anybody else in here remember that brand that's not of here? See, you never heard of it. There was a brand when we were in high school, maybe like 20 years ago, it's called Not of This World. It was like a super cheesy Christian brand. And they had some shirts that were pretty cool, but it was that idea of like, we're in the world, but we're not of it because you're so cool. But I think it's so important to approach culture, to engage culture, and be a part of it, especially being a Christian.
Yeah, and I want to dig down on that because I think sometimes when we, in our lives, live our lives and say, well, I'm a Christian, I have to be completely different, I have to be completely separate, it almost alienates us from our friends. But the reality is that God has placed us in those relationships with our friends who maybe aren't Christians, or who may be wondering about faith, or maybe they're ready to take a step of faith, but they've never had anyone talk to us about what faith is. And if we remove ourselves and only hang out with Christians, then we lose the opportunity to even talk about faith, right?
Yeah, we don't ever want it to be like we have the cool kid club, right? And we're in our bubble and everybody else is everybody else. Like, Jesus' heart is to include. Jesus' heart is to bring people in. And so, yeah, I 1000% agree.
Yeah, and I think that's what Jesus in John 17 is talking about. Like, you need to be in the world. Because later on in Matthew, he's going to say, like, you need to go to the whole world. Mm-hmm. And so that's a difference for us as people in the culture. Like, we need to know what our friends are maybe watching. Like, we don't have to watch all of it because we need to put boundaries around ourselves on what is pure, what is lovely, what is right, what is wrong, all that. We have to put boundaries around ourselves, but we have to be able to have a conversation with our friends about why that's not right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think so much of the walk of a Christian is like, we get caught up on like, well, how do I want to save this person so bad, I want them to know Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of put the burden on ourselves, and it almost like psychs us out, makes us like nervous to talk about Jesus with our friends, when in reality, if we lead in love and we love people and we build relationships, those moments will come and we don't have to force them, right? Like, I have friends now that, 10, 15 years later, having been their friend, we've built relationships to the point now where I have no problem being like, hey, dude, like, what do you think about when you die? Like, what do you think about God? What do you think about Jesus? And it's because I've built relationships with them and that they know that I care about them. It's not like I'm just like hitting someone over the head with the Bible or things like that, So yeah. I think the key is with our friends especially, is like, love them well as Jesus would love them, and trust that the opportunities will present themselves without you feeling like the pressure, I have to do the work here.
Yeah, and so along with that, in culture in our lives, one of the big things in culture in our lives too is, as middle school and high school students, is social media. And so, what are your thoughts on social media as a Christian?
Social media. How many of you guys are on social media? By raising hands. YouTube is a whole rabbit hole, brother.
Only have that.
I watch way too much YouTube. Yeah, so social media, as a
But
Christian,
YouTube is a social
YouTube
media
is absolutely
platform.
social
Yes.
media, just so you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Social media, there's always this like debate of like, is social media good? Is social media bad? I think social media can be used for so much good, and it can also be used for so much bad, right? Whether it's like we're building people up and we're encouraging people, we're gassing people up, for something to accomplish. Social media can be such a cool way of like bonding people together. But it also can be, toxic, just like anything else. It can be a situation where the more and more you go into it, the less and less you think of yourself, the less and less you think of the world around you. And so it's one of those things that you definitely have to gauge, and it's like a car. You have to treat it with the respect. It's like, this thing is awesome. It can take you all these cool places, but it's also a death machine. So that's what I would describe social media.
Yeah, one of the students asked, I'm going to get to jump to one of their questions because it's so close to that. So social media can be a portal for temptations, right? Mm-hmm. But it also has knowledge and learning and can be good. So how do we make that transition to making social media good versus leaving it in seeing it all as bad?
Have you guys ever heard that verse where it basically just says take your thoughts captive? Has any of you guys ever heard that? Okay, a couple of you guys. There's the idea in the Bible that when negative thoughts or bad thoughts come into your head, that it's important that you take your thoughts captive. And a lot of the times with me, as I'm just scrolling social media, it's super important that when something negative or something inappropriate comes into my feed, that I'm just that's going to get sent out of my brain right now. I'm just going to focus on what's good. I think that with social media, we just have to really guard our hearts, man. We just have to guard our hearts. We have to think to ourselves. I think you told me earlier the joke. It was if you can't put whatever post you're looking at up on the big screen at church, it's probably not something. Was that a Brad quote?
No, that was your boss.
Sorry.
That was your boss.
I'm losing track. My brain's all foggy. It's a good idea that I've never heard before. But the concept of hey, is this appropriate? Is this something I should be or for me, the one that I have to check myself on is this something I should be laughing at? Because there's some stuff that I'm think it's super funny, and I'm wait, I shouldn't think this is funny at all. So
yeah,
kind of real.
Yeah, and now that we have kids, I think about if my kids found this in 10 years, what would they think about me as a man, as a dad? How would they respect me? And so, in middle school and high school, sometimes we think, oh, well, nobody's watching, or maybe my friends will think this is really funny right now. But what we've seen with a lot of athletes recently is how is that affecting their scholarships? That's affecting getting signed to deals. It's voiding contracts in the pros.
I'm going to give you a really personal story here really quick. So I recently, within the last couple of years, I signed to a really big gaming org. They're called Complexity. Tim the Tapman is one of the owners, if any of you guys know who that is. But when they were signing me, as I was getting my contract ready, I'm super pumped. I'm this is so great. I'm going to be on one of the coolest gaming teams around. My manager shoots me a message or an email, and he goes, hey, so we've been going through some of your tweets, and we need you to delete some of these tweets. And they were tweets from 8 years ago. They went back and found tweets, things that I had said that were not very nice, not very Christ-like, and they had dug all the way through literally every tweet I had ever tweeted, and they sent me 3. They're hey, we need you to delete these. And I was man, dude, I wasn't even the same person 8 years ago, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you just how much what you put out there on the internet, it stays out there on the internet, and that's something to come back to that, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's it may have an effect now, but in the future it could have an even greater effect, and it can cause you to not get a job. It can cause you to not be hired by the employer you want to. And so, yeah, it's so important for us to acknowledge that we as Christians not only as Christians, have to know how to use social media effectively. And so switching gears a little bit, what capacity do you use your faith in music and streaming? Because you're also, we didn't mention the music side as much.
Yeah. I mean, I do music, obviously, here at church and playing bands and things like that. But with my faith, it's funny, as I've grown up, I've started to become more and more bold in my faith, especially when I'm like streaming and stuff nowadays. If someone comes in my stream and they're like, hey, I'm having a really rough day, this or that happened, or I lost my job or anything, I'm like, I'll stop everything that's happening on the street, be like, I'm just gonna pray for you, and we'll see what happens. And a funny one that I started doing on my stream is I have like a counter on my stream that's like how many days I've gone without saying a bad word on stream. It's like days without cussing, and I'm at like 560 something days straight on stream without saying a bad word.
It's awesome.
But just little things like that where it's like, it's not necessarily directly correlated to Jesus, but as soon as someone asks me like, hey, why are you doing that? And I'm able to share like about my faith, or I'm able to share about a number of different things. But and then with music and stuff, like I've played shows in some of the darkest places with people that have no idea about God at all. Lots of people that are depressed, have anxiety, the whole nine, everything you can imagine. And in those scenarios for me, it's like my faith kicks in and like I just gotta be a light here. Like how many people can I love on? How many hugs can I give? How many stories can I listen to? I just want to listen and hear and encourage folks. So those are like some little ways that I'm able to use my faith in those environments.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how should our faith be playing a role in what we put into, we talked about it a little bit, but what we put our mind in, fill our mind with, for instance, like music, movies, TV shows, social media, all of this stuff. How should our faith interact with that?
Yeah, I mean, I like all kinds of music. I like all kinds of movies and TV shows and stuff, and I don't know if any of you guys can relate to this, but I've noticed with myself, if I'm always watching or listening to things that are kind of negative, kind of more, I guess, like, typical nowadays, like, I'll slowly over time mentally just start to, like, go down into a pit, and I'm just like, man, everything is so sad, the world is terrible. I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with listening to music or watching movies that aren't Christian movies, like, but I think there's a balance there, and you gotta know for yourself what that looks like and pray about it. I know I was on tour earlier this year, February and March. I was on for like a month, and it was brutal. Like 4 or 5 weeks in a van, a different state or city every single day. No one that I really knew from home with me, and it was in that time that I realized, like, man, like the more I listen to like worship in this, like the more my spirit's just like being lifted, the more I'm just like dwelling on how much I miss my family or the things that I've given up, the more that my mentality will go negatively. And so it was in that moment that I was reassured that, man, like if I just feed it doesn't matter if I'm like laying in the back of a van at 3 a.m, I'm listening to worship and I'm connected with God, and I'm in such a good place because of that. And so just understanding like what we feed into our minds, what we feed into our souls, we also are reflected in like our mentality and reflected in like the way we're thinking about things and how we're feeling, and that stuff is very real.
Yeah, for sure. On your stream on social media, have you ever been, this is one of the questions they submitted, have you ever been threatened?
All the time.
Awesome.
Yeah, I had a dude tell me one time he was going to spit in my face, if you ever saw me. That was fun. And then he saw me and he just put his head down and kept walking. And I was like, okay. Most people don't realize I'm like a giant in real life. They see me on this little screen, this little square on the screen. But yeah, I mean, I'm threatened all the time. Mostly people just trolling or whatever. And I don't know. As I've gotten older, I've just kind of learned to let the negativity just kind of like bounce off. And if you don't have a voice in my life, in other aspects of my life, like why would I give you a voice to try to tear me down or something like that? It's just not worth it, really. So if you're not in my circle, I honestly kind of care less what you have to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, along those same lines, someone asked, how do you deal with like cyberbullying?
Yeah, so my stream, we have like a zero tolerance policy for any sort of like cyberbullying or trolling or like tearing people down. And so I've kind of like cultivated like a safe space in my stream where people can just like come and hang out and share what they're going through, share what life is doing for them, good and bad, and not feel like they have to run the risk of potentially being cyberbullied. For me, it's just like I have no tolerance for watching someone like beating another person up, whether it be like literally physically or emotionally. It's just not something that I kind of like let fly. And both in my house with my kids, and then like on the stream and stuff as well. We keep it clean.
Yeah, that's so important. Like knowing your boundaries and knowing that you set that stuff up ahead of time, so that if something does happen, you're like, nope, it's done. And so maybe for you in your social media realm, like you set it up to where if someone has a comment that's rude to you or whatever, you just go straight to the block button. Like you just know in your head that I'm immediately gonna block them if they say something mean to me. Or maybe you just know, like, if someone slides into my DMs and starts to threaten me or starts to, like, put me down or start to do whatever it is, it's just that maybe what they're feeling is something deeper than what I can understand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I oftentimes, I try to turn the other cheek like Jesus would do. But I also, when someone is being, like, super mean or negative or toxic, I try in my head to ask myself, like, what could they possibly be going through that has led them to this place? Because obviously they're in a much worse spot than I am, And so I try to have compassion and empathy. Oftentimes I'll message someone on the side like, "Hey, dude, like, what's the deal? Like, I'm trying to set these things." Especially if it's someone I know. If it's someone that I know that I have invested in a relationship with, that's kind of like in my community, that starts kind of acting out of character, that's a whole different thing than just some like random person going nuts on the internet. Then I'm like, I go in full like caring, like, hey, like, I'm not used to seeing you talk like this or act like this, like, what's going on, like, what's going on in your life, how can I pray for you, how can I love on you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is a super good question for us who are on social media and just see things. What about, how should we handle if we see someone else bullying someone else on social media? Or really almost in person, but we're specifically talking about on social media.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would do is I would talk to the person that's being bullied and just encourage them. Just like, hey, like, don't let that guy get to you. That's not true. Or I would say, like, you're awesome at this or whatever. I'd try to build them back up, build back up because they've been beaten down. And I would also, there's something powerful about like publicly sticking up for somebody, like whether it be in like the comments or whatever. If someone's like bullying another person, I had a situation actually play out today where I posted something on Twitter, being super stoked for my friend who had just gotten a new job, and he's taking on a super cool position with a cool gaming company in Texas. And I like had just posted something about him, like just gassing him up, like, oh, I'm so pumped for him, so inspiring. And someone went on there and like said some like demeaning comment, and I just was like, bro, like, what is the deal with this energy? Like, do you not see what this post is even about? Kind of thinking of me. So I like publicly just took a stand. I was like, I'm just not gonna let this even taint this post. And the person that posted all that negative stuff literally went and deleted all his comments. I mean, yeah, but I took that stance that like, nah, like we're not gonna let this energy just like go unchecked here. You know what I mean? Like this is about encouraging. This is not about tearing people down.
Yeah, and that's so important. Like as Christians, we almost have the responsibility. Not that it's just because we are Christians, but it's just because we have a knowledge of a Savior who loved us no matter what.
Yeah.
Like we have to stand up for people and show, number one, show grace, but also be like, but our God's also a God of justice too. And
yeah, I have actually a pretty cool verse. It's my second verse, John 16, 33. And this is coming from Jesus as well. He says, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, you'll have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world, right? And so just remembering that even though in this moment things might be awkward or I don't like the toxicity that's going around here, I can take heart in knowing that Jesus already overcome everything on my behalf. At the end of the day, we know how the end of the book goes, right, guys? Like, we know that at the end of the day, like, we're going to be in heaven, we're going to be with Jesus, we're going to be having the time of our lives, it's going to be the best thing ever. And so when I keep that eternal mindset, it allows me to navigate situations in the present with a different sort of, like, I don't know, things kind of lose their weight pretty fast when you start to think of, like, them in the grand scheme of, like, eternity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that a lot of the times just thinking on that gives you the courage to like stand up in a situation in social media or in real life when things are kind of going astray.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're gonna wrap up. It's 8:00, and so we're about to pick up. I know you kind of like sushi, somewhat, right? No.
Sushi?
Sushi.
Oh, I love
Yes.
sushi. Yeah.
Okay, so I got some gummy sushi for you.
Gummy sushi?
Gummy sushi. So it's fake sushi. Actually, Jake got it for you.
I thought it was something like a California roll.
Oh yeah. And I just let it
Dragon
sit
roll.
out. I just let it sit out and get room temperature to make you even more sick than you are right now. So.
I do want to touch on one thing with you.
Yeah.
Before we go, guys, one last thing, all right? There's a verse in here from Mark, and it's kind of a scary verse, but I wanted to break it down in a way that we could apply it to our lives, especially as we deal with social media. So Mark 9:47 says this. It says, "If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. It's better to enter the kingdom of God with only one eye than to have two eyes and be thrown into hell." And it's kind of the idea of like, man, if I'm seeing something that's like pulling me down or leading me to temptation, like I gotta rid myself of it anyway. And I'm not sitting up here telling you guys you need to start like jabbing your eyes out. But I know for me personally in my life, like a lot of the times, my phone, for example, I just take Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I just delete them off my phone. Because a lot of times I know like having them here on my phone is not the best for me at times. And so I'm like, hey, instead of like even having the opportunity to be tempted, if I know that that's something that I have temptation with or that I fall in, I'm like, rather than cutting out my eye, which is the other option, which kind of sucks, I'm like, I'll just delete the app. You know what I mean? Or if it's my phone altogether, like maybe it's best I take some time away from my phone. But just understanding that there are ways that we, and measures that we can take to kind of avoid temptation, to avoid the downfalls of social media, the internet, and everything else without having to lose an eye or a hand or something.
Yeah, and one of the cool things, if you have an Apple iPhone, there isn't a content restrictions thing. You can literally block all that stuff out too, and so use it. And then I would encourage you, put screen time restrictions on it too, because sometimes we can get stuck in the scroll. Mm-hmm. We can get stuck in the scroll and just like video after video or reel after reel or post after post, and we don't realize that now we've spent 2 hours just scrolling through Instagram, and I've not really had an actual human conversation today. And so put some of those things on, and then have a friend that has the password to unlock it then. That's one of those things I want to encourage you to do. So I have some books. I don't know if you have anything you want to recommend. Culture is a big thing that I kind of read about a lot. And there's this great author called Bob Goff. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Bob Goff. Bob Goff has wrote 3 books that just kind of really I think you should read. First one is this, called Undistracted. Like in our lives, how many times have we been so distracted that we've lost our joy? We've lost our purpose. We feel like we're just here on this earth and just kind of wandering through life where we're not joyful, like everything is doom and gloom. Well, Bob talks about how we can become undistracted, to really focus on what God has in store for us. He also wrote a book called Love Does. Like, what does our faith look like? To put it in action. Love does. What does love do? He also wrote Everybody Always. Because the reality of the gospel truth is this. It's for everybody. The gospel is for everybody always. No matter how screwed up they are. If they're in prison, the gospel is still for them. Everybody always. And then Whisper is by Mark Batterson. It's a book on how to hear the voice of God. And sometimes we drown ourselves out through social media and we stop hearing what God is saying to us. And so I want to encourage you to read that one too. And then this is for us who really want to be in leadership. And this is a good one called How to Lead in a World of Distractions. And so sometimes we have to set these habits in place to turn down the noise that's going on all around us and turn up the voice of God instead. And so, those are some books I want to recommend to you guys. If you want to come up, you can look at them, whatever that is. But you guys are dismissed unless you have any last things.
Oh, you guys are awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys. Give Justin a hand real quick.